long time coming, I'll tell you.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
Rise and shine, sleepyhead. It's a brand new day. Now prepare to experience the most outrageous man on radio.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale.
This is insane.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
Thank you. Thanks for putting up that long intro. That kind of goes in tandem with my title card. I realize that I'm still kind of grainy and there's not much you can do. If you look up at camera 2 up there, you'll see white stuff on the ground. Yeah, it snowed. It snowed again. It's so weird, you know. But I was looking up. Yesterday I alluded to my, in case you're wondering.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I alluded to my 2021 garden planning record, and this also is for 2022. And I was looking back, and you know, into even April and March, of course, but there was like and somehow I got out of like kilter with the pages, I guess. Pages had stuck together, but overnight into May 1st was freezing, had to cover lettuce and potato plants. Still overnight low 30s weekend of 24th, 25th April. May 5th, 50s. Forecast through May 11th is overnight in the 30s, mid-30s. May 8th, hail. Like I said, I keep these books, these little journals. I started one yesterday. You know, I started the 22 section. I got 2 years out of one of these books. But yeah, it's kind of, you know, it's like that thing, you know, in the opening line.
This is insane.
You know, it's Sunday.
Weekend weather.
And I haven't taken a look, so we might as well go on this journey together. Forecast for today, 70% chance of snow, a high of 30 degrees, a low of 16 tonight. And tomorrow, a high of 27, a low of 14. Yeah. It's like the end of March. And then thunderstorms and rain Wednesday and Thursday. Temperatures will be warmer, but, it's going to be a nightmare in my attic. It's pretty crazy. So, anyway, that's your
Weekend weather.
That was easy, simple, and painless.
Hey, it's me. How you doing, man?
Well, I guess I'm doing okay today, kind of. I mean, as usual, it's the normal morning sluggishness. You get addicted to caffeine, I guess, in a sense. I don't know. It seems, it's been well over 90 days. I started in late December. So, into January, February, March, that's like good 90 days where I've been on this Chanca Pietro, if I'm pronouncing that right, the Peruvian stonebreaker, and then I added in the milk thistle and dandelion. Well, there's some dandelion root in this Chanca Pietro tablet, as well as hydrangea. I'm not sure why that's in there. And then I've been doing the rosemary and ginger and some free-range eggs from pasteurized chickens, which I hadn't really been eating. The only eggs I usually would have would be like maybe a pickled egg, which I have some pickled eggs in there. I'm hungry. I'm starving. I lost a pound yesterday, even though I walked and did a lot of stuff. But then I put in a big order of food. Like a ridiculous amount of stuff I had delivered because I wanted to just zero out my account, right, for personal reasons. It's getting near the end of the month, and I'm like to have my ledger clean when I start the month. It's just the way I exist. I function and do my budgeting. In other words, I want to know how much money I have, how much income I have, what I can spend money on, what I can't. And I dabble the reason I'm coming on, it's 4:34 a.m. Eastern time on March 27th, Sunday, March 22nd, in the calendar year 2022, for those of you seeing this in posterity, if this survives the oncoming cataclysm. You do know about that, right? The sun's going to nova sometime between now and 2046. Could happen, today. But we might have, 20 some years. I hope I live 20 some more years. I'd like to see the end of the world, I mean, the cataclysm is so insane that it's going to be like, whoa, whammo, It's like that line in that, I don't know, remember when those guys, hey, we got no business being here out in space. That's another sound clip I need to grab. What are we even doing out here in space? But when the one guy went space crazy, and they were dragging him back to the ship, and he said, "Man, I had like a great seat to watch the whole thing." And then once they realized they were heroes, and after the whole thing was all over, he goes, "Now you're not going to tell anybody about what happened up there, right?" Yeah. Save the world. Superheroes, save the world. Think about how movies have changed, in just the past, generation to, which is like 2 decades. I was saying that yesterday. Generations like 20, A generation to me is people coming of age and coming of age now is 21. It used to be 18. At 18, you were a man. At one time at 16, you were considered a man or a woman. Women got married at 15, 16, and stayed together their entire lives, raised families. It's weird how, cultures, society changes, weird stuff, different strokes for different folks, I guess. But anyway, considering we're, contemporary or modernity, if you look at pop culture, which is my primary interest, and I spent the better part of my life in pop culture, which is another reason why I've gone into this anime type of title card. I did a different one, which was more of a cartoon, graphic novel one 2 shows ago. But the reason I'm sticking with this, kind of drawn version of me and the set is, and the absurd thing, it's become clear to me why people don't get it. And Tony C has broken through the barriers of density and frequency. It's like looking at when you live through several generations. It's interesting. And I don't know what's wrong with some of the people in the really older generation. Because, like I say, and I don't want to bring my family members into it, but, you have firsthand. There's not a whole lot of people that, in their 80s that I speak to. When I was younger, I used to talk to a lot of older people. So it's kind of why I have a connection, with even generations older than I am. But in my case, speaking with a family member, one in particular who's quite old, her mind is still, very sharp and quick. And, as much as she's able, in other words, being exposed to contemporary society, the culture of the day, it's interesting. She can grasp it and, and see, see the differences, the changes that have gone on, and notice how blatant, the blatant things that just stand out, and, as do I, and yet I'm like 25, 28 years younger than she, almost 30 years younger than she is. But I still see, I see the world that way because I've always had, even at a younger age, once I hit the job market, I was working for there were always people who were older than I was, who I worked with and for. Because that's the way it was. And I don't know if you've ever watched this show, on YouTube show, Fran Blanche, like Fran's Lab, right? It's Fran, She's like a geek engineer, but she's also the one who invented Frantone, like pedals for guitars, like sound effects and stuff. And she's done a lot of stuff. I mean, she is a collection of things, man. I'd love to just go, just like peruse through all the stuff she has. I mean, gadgetry. She collects all this stuff, and then she does experiments, and she takes apart different things and shows how they work or fixes things. She's interesting. She's had to move her studio a couple of times because of, it's pity when you're not a property owner or something like that. That's why I'm so glad I bought this house, because there's such a sense of security. It's yours, leaky roof and all. and rodents in the backyard. But I mean, hopefully these kinds of problems are solvable. But being told that the rent has doubled, or that you have to move out because somebody purchased the property you're renting, that's not cool. So the trade-off, from my standpoint, I'm sorry for doing that. You drink coffee, you get coffee in your mustache. Sometimes my nose gets itchy. I'm just a human being. But normally on her show, because I want to give her credit, I don't like to ever take credit for, for something I'm saying. But, she was getting into a thing on her. If you go to I don't know if it's under Fran Blanche or Fran's Lab or whatever. But if you put those kind of search words in YouTube, you'll find her. She's a character. And anyway, she was just like off topic, because normally she's into, engineering, tech, and, creative projects and stuff like that. And lately it's been her trials and tribulations, because she's been forced to move for about, I don't know, the third or fourth time from various places. And she has these, it's like all this stuff and these lab setups where she does all her work. And she, creative work too, not just technical, electronic engineering stuff. Be that as it may, she was reading some articles about how like IBM and some other companies apparently have been sued, or there's this thing where they're firing their older employees. An older employee could be anyone from, as old, starting at age 35, but in, somebody who's 50. On my anime me over, over here, for some reason, when I did the transition to create this, the mustache is almost non-visible, but you can see the soul patch. See it? So, I don't know. Maybe I should shave the mustache and just keep the soul patch. It's not a bad look. I like myself as an anime character. Even though I don't normally wear glasses outside of doing this show. They're just reading glasses. Too much stuff. Too many things that I've got to, look at.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But, the idea was they were just like everybody's feeling some kind of pressure from somebody these days. Some group, people with fists in the air, or, we want this, we want that, right? That's what my whole then what, hoodie, the one I have up here in the upper corner, which is available in a t-shirt and everything else you can imagine. As I said at the end of the show yesterday, then what is the answer to those people who are protesting or making demands for things? It's like, okay. It's like I said about with AOC wanting to forgive people's student death. Student death. Jeez. Student debt. It is. I need a raison d'etre. To exist. Anyway, my attitude is like, yeah, give it to them. The heck with it. I don't care. Then what? Okay, guess what? You don't know student debt. Now what are you going to do? Get a job? Take one of those $11 million, well, not $11 million. There are $11 million jobs out there. I'm sure I could get one if I wanted one. I'm sure Fran Blanche could get one if she wanted to. She's a genius, quite a genius. But there's 11 million jobs out there that nobody's taking. And there's nothing to do with student debt because, it's just the thing, most people, first of all, until May, there's like a moratorium on paying it back. And even when that ends, all you do is file, apparently, because I know a couple of people who've been doing it. It's a pain, but they just file a bunch of paperwork and you could, postpone the thing, year by year. I mean, one way or another, a lot of people are going to postpone this debt until they die or retire. They don't have jobs, so they're not going to get Social Security anyway. So it's not like their Social Security wages are going to be attached. So they're just going to be on welfare, and they don't attach welfare, food stamps, and Section 8 housing. You see what I mean? So they may as well just get rid of it. It was funny money, fiat currency, whatever. I mean, to begin with. But that's the answer to then what, but what, to get back to this Fran Blanche, thing that I'm using as a stepping off point. She was reading these articles and, apparently, and like I say, IBM seemed to be the key company, but there were other companies involved in this, that they felt they had to put Gen whatever, millennials or something into the company. But so they were getting rid of people anywhere from the age of 35, 40 to 50. Engineers now we're talking about. We're not talking about just your run-of-the-mill worker doing a job that you can be trained for. It's like, I've worked in between, and when I was a young lad, because I started working when I was 16. And so, you go to a job when you're a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old, there's somebody who's there and they say, okay, here's a new guy, show him the ropes, right? And sometimes, it takes you, in one night, they show you what you have to do, and within a week or two, you're as good as the guy who showed you the ropes. We're not talking about that kind of job. We're talking about engineers, IBM, computer sciences, right? Now, it would seem to me that a guy or girl or whatever in their 40s, say, who's put in 20 years as an engineer, trained as an engineer, went through the education system when it was really giving you an education, not spending half the time on some kind of indoctrination and conditioning, wokeism or something like that, revisionist history, trying to tell you that, people 400 years ago or the founding fathers were whatever, when you or your ancestors weren't even in this country at that time, so you have no skin in that game. So why are they bothering putting a guilt trip on you, right? And so what she was trying to say, and I agreed with her wholeheartedly, and I think a lot of people, I think there was a lawsuit involved with this where they were trying to make the case, or lawsuits, various lawsuits. This is an ongoing thing right now. We're in the midst of this. It's interesting. So they're putting in, so you take this millennial who's come up through a school system that obviously has focused more, and I know because I have, and again, I don't want to bring in names and, because I respect people's privacy, but I know people who are teachers, put it that way, and who've been teachers for many years, right? Several decades, who've watched the changes over the years and watched the changes that have come through where it's gone from actually teaching to where there was pressure from the state and the federal level, the administrators, to make sure that the students passed the test so that the school system would get its funding. And so they were doing more in prompting for the people to pass a test than they were for somebody to learn the basics on how to survive in life. I mean, after all, that's really what, primary school is all about, right? That's why I still say you probably only need, if they really were serious, if they didn't want to create a nanny state, because that's what we have now. Think about it. A woman gets pregnant, she goes on maternity leave. As soon as she gets out of maternity leave, her infant is, well, it depends on whether the money what their caste. And yes, we have a caste system here in the U.S. Same as, some people would think there's a caste system in India or something. But depending on what, where you fall, you either have some person in your house, right, take care of your child, literally a nanny, or you turn your infant over to the nanny state. So infant daycare, right? To child care, preschool, daycare, whatever, and then eventually kindergarten. And then for the next, for 15 years of a child's life or more, they're raised by the state, right? From early in the morning till the afternoon. And if they go to college, then it's even worse. So, and the way things are going as far as, life expectancy is dropping. I keep trying to tell people they don't understand this. The advent of processed foods is really only started in earnest within the last 40 some years. And it's very likely that this generation that's been brought up completely, totally on processed food, who have the highest numbers in type 2 diabetes and, all of these serious conditions based on processed food. Like I say, 40,000 people die every week. Yeah, you heard me right. Every week in the U.S. That's according to the CDC's leading causes of death. And they're dying of things that are like heart complications, things, various kidney type of diseases, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, these kinds of things. Even the old-fashioned flu and pneumonia and stuff, which are immune-based, is if they had stronger immune systems and stuff. Cancer's a big killer. Sugar feeds cancer. And all these carcinogens that are in half of these things, and this GMO stuff and everything. So, in general, when the government issued, that press release that said that the life expectancy in the U.S. dropped by 2 years, and this is just a few years back. It has nothing to do with the plague thing, that pretty much was broadly including people from, up to their 80s and 90s and stuff. In other words, when you come up with an average, it goes from, you should know this, and if you weren't taught this in school, and I think a lot of people don't understand basic math, reading, they say something like 19, approximately 20%, a fifth of the people coming out of high school can't read, don't have reading skills up to par. And 40, probably 50%, but, if you want to be technical with government statistics, they always lowball it. 50% of the people, whether they've gone through whatever age they are functionally illiterate right now in this country. Half the country is functionally illiterate. But it's skewed toward the younger side. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, and I know, and I'm not, this is going to come full circle back to this IBM, this whole idea of, getting rid of people, 40-year-old being replaced by a 20-some-year-old or something. There's a distinct possibility, and I just want to throw this out here, that if the advent of all of these processed foods, GMOs, weird pesticides, carcinogens, and all this stuff, and this they're just pushing sugars into people and things that are just not good. And all these diseases everybody's getting, right? Again, I'm not talking about the 2.5-year, plague thing that they just won't let die. There's a possibility that a lot of people in their 20s today, they might not even make it to 50. You understand? See, someone who's, say, 50, 60, 70, 80 now, let's look at somebody who's 80 years old. Well, half their life, their diet and their basic years, okay? So when they were, up to their age of, the formative years, not just mentally, and through real education, but diet and exercise, they had the first 40 years of their life eating healthy. So then along comes, and they also knew how to cook and prepare things because that's just the way the generation was for those folks. So processed foods come along and fast foods and all that stuff. And of course, let's order a pizza on Friday. Let's get, we'll feed the kids these cereals, and this kind of stuff. But the kids, not them, they're not eating the cereal, right? They're eating a traditional breakfast. Kids get off to school and they're sitting, you see what I mean? And they're making dinner and, for the most part, it's like eat your vegetables, and it's the kid not wanting to. And then the parents eventually giving up, or at that same time is when, about the same time, 40 some odd years ago, when you had both parents began working because they had to. It wasn't even like the glass ceiling being broken, which it was, but it was more than that. It was that you couldn't afford the house, the car, the insurance, and all these appliances and everything else unless both parents were working, be it the man or the woman, or whatever. So the person 80 was less, who's made it to that age, was less susceptible to these processed foods, these poisons. All right. And they were also more likely, from a standpoint of pharmaceuticals, they give something like, I couldn't believe this. I just, I don't want to do it because, YouTube will find a way of saying it. But, when I grew up, you had like a sugar cube with some kind of, like they got you for the polio thing, the maybe smallpox, something else. You had a couple of, as a kid, and it usually you got it at school, something to prevent you from catching this thing. And I understand now that there's something like, it's a ridiculous number, like something like 70 things it's outrageous when you think about it. And so that's another thing that people on the older side didn't have, that, stuff, rolling around in their systems. But they seem to make it to like in their 80s and 90s. Just go to these Florida, or look at these long-term care facilities, and assisted living facilities. I'm not talking about nursing homes now. That's a different story. Nursing homes are kind of like hospitals for people, this really is a hospital for somebody that they don't have room at the inn for. No, I'm talking about people who are basically still semi-self-sufficient, and they're just into some kind of retirement community or assisted living. There's, something like that. But there's people in those places, and they're in their 80s and 90s. And they're totally, they're cogent, but they're restricted. They're old, they're using walkers and, and different things like that. They're not as agile. They're in pain, they suffer, they tend to be more visits to the doctors than somebody half their age. But what I'm getting at is that those individuals, say, who have made it to that point were less involved, or consumed less of this processed food. And they also had a more open, there was I would say, I guess the idea is religion, that they also grew up with more of a moral, ethical, religious background, whatever that might have been, but they had a sense of spiritualism in them and an understanding, and something like that, which in today's world, no matter where you take it, whether you're into meditation and some kind of new age thing, the difference between meditating and being silent in prayer is like one of semantics. Not, that's it. There is no difference. And so, that's the thing. So saying that you're going to go to heaven as opposed to, rise to another, density, or become one with the cosmos or the one or something. What's the difference with saying you're going to go to heaven and be one with God, right? Or something. Do you see what I mean? It's a matter of, it's semantics. So, but the number of people who are spiritual has diminished greatly. And while I'm on this, and I'm going to get back to the IBM thing and all that, I just started reading a book, and I haven't gotten much through it. It's called Beth McDougall, Your Pristine Blueprint. There she is. She's on YouTube. You can watch her. Beth McDougall, Dr. Beth, I think is the name of her channel. She talks about your pristine blueprint. It's out there. She's an actual physician, like, doctor, MD for 20 some years, but she's also been into, looking at this from another perspective too. Seeing that there's more to life than just medicine, that we're part of something bigger. But anyway, so, okay, there's a good possibility that the people in their 20s, that these millennials that they're putting in, who are eating this crap. Yeah, look at that. It's like, I can't believe it's supposed to snow all day. And, March comes in like a lion and out like a lamb. This ain't no lamb. Those people might not make it to, they won't make it to they probably won't make it to their late 70s. They'll be lucky if they make it, past, their late 60s. And you have to wonder if this isn't part of the Great Reset and part of the plan. Now I know some people say, well, a lot of millennials are vegans and they're gluten free and they're doing that. Yeah, and there's a lot of people that are spiritual and they're into meditation and stuff like that, which is all good. Eat healthy, be calm. The people who've lived the longest in life, that's the one thing they've all had in common, is they've had purpose and they were calm. They didn't let things get them crazy. I mean, it's one of my weaknesses. Every now and then I get off on a rant, or like all of these things that are happening to me overwhelm me sometimes. And I have to try to keep calm about that. I don't want to create cortisol in my body. Stress kills. And especially with this gallbladder thing. But the thing is, what they want to do is they want to basically, they're saying, okay, you're 40 some years old, maybe you're 50, you're an engineer, you've had 20, 30 years experience in computer technology. And believe me, these guys, just because, and women, just because they got wrinkles, right, and talk strange and listen to weird, different music and stuff, aren't into like, hip hop or rap or something like that, doesn't mean that they don't understand code. It doesn't mean they don't understand, aren't able to create, a chip that uses less power but has more processing power. Less in, more out. In fact, they're more likely to be problem solvers and to understand it because, like I've tried to say before, if you're involved in something at the outset, you see things very clearly. Because you understand the entire process from the beginning. It's like when I talk about the internet being broken. I was involved in the internet from its inception, more or less. Basically. And so when you see the code develop, and when you've been a part of like helping develop some things that were eventually widely adapted and have become commonplace today, but 35 years ago people didn't even know, how to do, or that the code, the basic code, whether it was server-side code or HTML, JavaScript, whatever, that that they didn't realize the code itself had that capability within it. You had to experiment with those lines of code and putting things and adding things and putting them in certain orders, and then testing it and retesting it and putting it through the ringer. And then it's like, hey, we could actually do this with this code, right? Well, that's who these people are. And I mean, I'm one of those kind of people, though I still get offered jobs. Because some of the companies, the funny thing about it is some of the companies that have a lot of the younger people working for them, they're advertising aggressively right now for people because they can't find people in their 20s that can do the job they want, solve the problems. And this isn't some kind of like age discrimination. I mean, it's age discrimination against the person who's 35, 40, 50. But what I'm talking about isn't me being age discriminatory against somebody in their 20s, all right? To the contrary. It just has to do with the experience and understanding, having gone through that thing. It's no difference than being an apprentice on a construction crew, right? Or learning a trade. I mean, everything is a trade. You know, some people, they put their nose up or their nose down or whatever they do, snub somebody because they think, okay, well, this guy's a plumber, but I'm I work for Adobe. Well, what's the difference? In many cases, the plumbers, is a problem solver, has done more work, has put in more hours, has created more things, is creative within their work, right? And what have you done, right? Emailed people, texted people, written a few lines of code here, worked on something that guys wrote that was originally based upon. I mean, let's look at the beginning here. Both Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Now, Bill Gates came to power because Bill Gates didn't go to college. So he not only has no right to talk about medical things, which he's constantly talking about. He's no doctor. But he's also no computer scientist. You know, his father had money, and he got in on a deal, speaking of IBM, that where there was a conflict with software, and he managed to, I believe it was something like $50,000 or something, he managed to create the software for IBM because it would have been a conflict of interest or something, and that's how Microsoft was built. I mean, I'm leaving out 10,000 different things, but that's it in a nutshell. But both he and Steve Jobs himself, remember, it was Wozniak who was the engineer, who built the physical machine. Jobs was like kind of the idea guy and the salesman, right? The marketing man. But he had good ideas and he had a good grasp of the technology and saw the possibilities and had a good feel for what the future was like. He was a futurist, and he saw he had his finger on the pulse of what people liked and didn't like, and what would work, and where society was headed. But both of those guys back in I think it was the 60s, late 60s, could have been the early 70s, but sometime way back when, went to the Xerox PARC, project, and saw Xerox was using a machine that had a mouse and what we call a GUI, a graphical user interface. And they were given a demonstration of that. You see? Anyway, flash forward, and Apple beat Microsoft because there was no Microsoft. Apple came out first. Remember, Microsoft was created because of this weird IBM, whatever, Bill Gates type of whatever nonsense. So you have this creation of this GUI, this graphical user interface, and Wozniak, basically creating this, Mac, which I have a copy of, behind me, which is impossible to see. But the early Mac. All right. I mean, I've got one. Let's see if we can shine the light and I could ditch my head. And let me get rid of you don't know what you don't know. Just hang in there. You see that? Underneath the girl wearing the then what? That's the original Mac. The you don't know is flashing over top of it. You got it? Yeah, I'm back. And so is that. And so, that Mac, like I said, and I was using that, and I had a modem, a 300 baud modem. I was using the internet back in 1985. I was emailing people in Australia, emailing a friend in Australia, and emailing my brother who lived, I don't know, 500 miles away from, or I don't know if it was that many, several hundred miles away from me at the time. Because he had a PC. So, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. That's 35 years there. And before that, I had the original Commodore computer back in the early 80s. So, yeah, I guess I'm a little older than I might look. I don't know, to some people. I mean, when you're young, anybody over the age of 30 looks older, right? That used to be the line in the 60s. Don't trust anyone over 30, you know. But what I'm saying is that people who came up, you know, that's how this all happened. And people who came up through that era, all right, they understood the foundational elements of the technology. So they saw it. So to them, they see it very clearly, just like a plumber can look, you know, somebody at home is like, what's wrong? I can't figure out what's wrong, right? Well, a plumber could come in and in a few moments, you know, check a few things out and whatever. And because that plumber has probably gone on a job site and, you know, worked, you know, in setting up plumbing in a new home before it was, you know, before the walls were closed in, a plumber could basically know where a problem is and say, oh, you know, you're not getting your vent, you know, you're not getting your proper venting, you know, such and such or whatever. Let me check this. It looks like, you know, your pressure's off. Maybe these are old pipes. They're, you know, sometimes the pipes, they get like old pipes get like there's only this much, you know, they just filled up with gunk in old houses and things. And it's the same with code. There's no difference between a plumber and somebody who writes code, right? Or an electrician, you know, somebody who does, you know, runs wire in houses, or a carpenter, right? Or a landscaper for that matter. You know, and the list goes on. You know, a baker, right? A brewmaster, you know? You know, and it's funny how our society, you know, they look just because of certain wages that people get or something, like, you know, they call it big tech, but it's not called big bakery, you know, or something. But, you know, you go to a bakery sometime in the big city and you look at some of the masterpieces that some of these people create, you know, and the great chefs. I mean, chefs do get respect. You know, I got to admit that, at least by the ruling elite. You know, I've been forced to be somewhat of a gourmet myself, just because for my own health purposes, because it's so hard to find nutritionists and doctors and even pharmacists or whatever to really give you the answers you want. So you have to basically, you know, do all the research yourself, and then you have to, you know, you end up being your own guinea pig and find the foods that your body works with. But at the same time, like I showed you about Dr. Beth's book, which I recommend you check her website out, check her book out. It's brand new. But the idea that you have these things, which I often talk about, and I talked about in my book Codex back here, where I deal with the hard problem of consciousness, the idea that there's consciousness outside of the brain. The brain does not, this bioelectric brain does not create consciousness. This isn't your mind. Your mind is your consciousness. You see, consciousness is outside of there. This is it, your brain is more of a receiver of your consciousness. You know, and some people in from a religious standpoint would call it your soul consciousness, or your soul, just soul, period. Right? And, you know, whether or not you know, if you don't believe in that, that's fine and dandy. But it just seems to me that there's more literature throughout what we would call recorded history that points to the spiritual aspects and this idea of the soul, consciousness, and the spirit, than there are modern, what we would call scientific, principles, physics. And even physics itself is now leaning towards the metaphysical, right? Yeah, that's what we're finding. Quantum physics. And so it's interesting. It's coming full circle. A lot of people, that it's not clear to them. But just to finish up this idea of where I was talking about this, or Fran Blanche brought this thing up, So, why would you get rid of a 45 or 50-year-old engineer who has this incredible knowledge and replace them with like somebody who's 24? Who hasn't seen these problems, or seen the development of this, of the chip, the technology in general, the code, how the machine was put together, right? That's like saying Steve Wozniak from Apple, don't bring him in if you have a problem to solve with some new machine you're trying to create, as if he wouldn't be able to look at it and like I'm saying, like a plumber, electrician, or somebody else, or any kind of, or like a baker who could tell you why your food isn't tasting right, or it's not, rising or turning into the way you thought the recipe said it should. Whereas a chef or someone like that could look at it and go, oh, man, you put too much of that in, or you shouldn't have, you got the, right? And look at the temperature. You're off. 375. It should be 425. That pizza, you're not going to get that kind of crust unless you've got it in a 500 degrees. That crust is hitting 500 degrees. And by the way, if you really want it to taste like put some cornmeal underneath there, underneath that pizza. When you're making it on that stone or in that pizza oven. It's a nice secret. It's a little secret. Cornmeal. So, yeah, this is an interesting phenomenon. And like I say, I don't want to be a harbinger of doom, but I mean, reality is, the sun's probably going to nova on us like it has every 12,000 years. And at least every 6,000 years, which we come under that, that whole time period is right upon us, this Earth catastrophe, Like I said, I've talked about Ben Davidson, suspiciousobservers.org. Check that out. Or Doug Vogt. So I don't know, we're not going to Mars. We're not going to build a base on Mars. We're not going to explore space, distant space, Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek Picard. I love those shows. I love Star Trek. Like I say, never let a good Star Trek reference go to waste, Hey, Scotty, I'm talking about Star Trek again. PC out. But anyway, because we're not going to last that long. And there's a good possibility that despite the fact that there are some of these people who are trying to eat healthy and non-GMOs, we're in this situation right now where there's going to be food shortages because a lot of the wheat and, a lot of some of the basic foods and fertilizers come from Ukraine and Russia. I hate to mention those words because they're probably algorithmic. They'll start freezing me up just because you mentioned the name. What kind of world do we live in? What is this? When you think about it. And so it's become clear to me why people don't get it. They don't get this show, and they don't get what I'm talking about. And I think I've given you that, that explanation. I don't think I left anything out. Right? So I'm not going to expound on that. And if you're confused or think I did leave something out, I didn't. Just go rewind and watch the first part again. I think I covered everything. And if you want to know more about what I'm talking about, check out Fran Blanche or Fran Lab. Check out Dr. Beth. Check out, look into the IBM. I think there's a lawsuit there. Age discrimination. Look into these things yourself. Use your mind. And don't do a search on the internet. Like, just do some search and take the first thing you got and say, oh, see, he's wrong. Look, I question whether people on 40 years of processed food are going to live more than 40 years. I'd say the life expectancy of someone born in the 70s, say, or 1980. I mean, 70s, somewhere in that range. I question whether or not they'll live beyond 60 without major complications. And don't count on big pharma or big med to do anything. Right? They're just in it for the money. It's a corporatocracy, and every year it gets worse and worse. They're not curing us. Like I said, I got rid of TV, but you turn on the TV, all you see is lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies. Right? So they're obviously doing something wrong. And every one of those drugs was approved by the FDA. And they're not even getting into to processed food, but it's the Food and Drug Administration. So they give the food, big ag or whatever, the food industry, the lobby, whatever, they've got a major pass. And I said yesterday, when you go in a grocery store, 90% of the products in there are processed foods. And the stuff that's in there is just high carbs, high sugars, which are basically the same thing. It's just metabolized different. One goes instantly in, is instantly absorbed. And the other one is like metabolized. And unless you're some kind of athlete, or whatever, you're not metabolizing that stuff. And we're not exercising as a society the way we should. We're locked. First of all, they locked people up for the longest time. And more people and more jobs are basically people working out of their houses, right? So that's less exercise. And what do? They get in their car, they go somewhere, and what? They drive to the grocery store and buy processed food, walk around the grocery store, and that's their exercise, or walk around a big box store. I mean, that's some exercise. But, it's not the same. They're inside an HVAC system, closed environment, smelling weird chemicals. If it's like a hardware, one of those box, Home Depot, Lowe's, or those kinds of places. If it's and if it's a grocery store, do you really think that the filtration on their HVAC system is that good? With the high volume and the different amount of people that come in there from all walks of life with who knows what kind of diseases. See, I said from the very outset that whole thing could have been solved with the amount of money they were throwing out, right? Was it trillions of dollars, I guess. That they'd have been better off to give tax breaks to box stores, grocery stores, and even small businesses to upgrade their HVAC systems. And perhaps they should have retooled the companies that made the HVAC systems to work on the fans, the circulation systems of air conditioners and larger HVAC systems, building HVAC systems, and the filtration devices. In other words, to have better filtration that, could, dealing with microns, right? And a faster circulation so that the air within a building was circulating at like maybe twice. In other words, the room itself the air was replaced twice as fast, 2 times more than was currently. And people wouldn't have had to, have covered anything or whatever. Because in other words, those, that would have been the answer. And I made a makeshift. There's an old video of mine, and you could see it because I believe it's in the card, like I call these the title cards, where I created and I got the idea from my dentist, actually, so I don't want to take credit like I invented this. But if you take a box fan, the 1999 box fan, one of those things that's like a square, but it sits on the floor. It's like, it's thin, but it's, square when you look at it, from a 2-dimensional standpoint, right? Not 3D cube. It's a square, but it's square. And just like a filter, you can get a square filter. And they're like about 20 inches. So like a 20-inch box fan and a 20-inch filter. Well, you could find filters. I ordered mine online, both. I ordered my fan for $19.99 from Walmart, came delivered to the door. And I ordered a filter from like one of the Home Depot or Lowe's. I think it was Home Depot. I forget which. And I found a filter. It's just a thin filter, air filter. I have to get another one because they only last about 90 days. But I don't have it on all the time. So, I think you could probably get longer. I have one in my bedroom. And that filter filters out bacteria and viruses. They have those filters. And if you want to get a little extra out of it, spray a little. If you could find some stuff called Neutra Air by Lysol, which is like a combo, spray that, kills 99.9% of virus and bacteria. And you spray that, as this filter sucking this stuff in or in front of the filter, whatever. And you run that thing in your room, a small room, close the door, the room where you sleep or the room like where you're working, spending most of your time. And you run that long enough that it's going to circulate the air once or twice in that room, which really is just a matter of minutes, 5, 10, 15 minutes tops, right? I mean, unless you've got some giant cathedral ceiling living room. And besides, but the average person, you basically are clearing out 99.9% of the bacteria and virus in that room. In fact, whether there was some thing going around or not, you're less likely to catch cold, flu, or anything else. There's still that 0.1% possibility, but there's 0.1% possibility that you get, all kinds of things could happen to you. But there's no intention. See, there's no motivation to do that because those are preventative measures. And we don't see that happening. It's just like I say, when there are storms, and in Tornado Alley, I was watching, I watched something on YouTube. It was, horrible to see damage, by tornadoes just this past week in certain areas. And, like a tornado that was wrapped in rain. So people couldn't even see the tornado. So they're just driving down the road. And this one guy in an SUV was off to the side. I mean, fortunately survived. And he said, no, you couldn't see it. It was just, we were driving and it was just, it just got, all of a sudden, it just sounded like a Like they always say, it sounds like a train whistle or a train. But it was like the tornado was hidden within the rain. And you should have seen the destruction that thing did. Right? But, you know, people will rebuild, like, and the same, they do this down in the Gulf areas where they have hurricanes and in Florida and stuff. They'll just rebuild those buildings again out of, like, sticks. You know, what I call stick homes, you know, 2x4s or those aluminum. I mean, it's aluminum. Instead of 2x4s, they have these aluminum things that you literally, if I had one in my hand, I could bend it. Well, what do you think, you know, something's going to do? See, I always envision, it's the year 2022. And if people wanted to live in Tornado Alley, okay? And this is going to sound really crazy, but, you know, I mean, I know I say here that I've broken through the barriers of density and frequency. I mean, that's how I have this, maybe that's how I have this knowledge, you know, and I'll follow up with this part 2 probably tomorrow or sometime in the coming week. But I just want to give you some basic, you know, engineering, architectural ideas that nobody's going to pay attention to and aren't going to be done, and it's too late. It's just like we can't fix the grid. The grid's going to go down, all right? And no, I'm not trying to sell my great solar stuff, power backups and stuff like that, though I think you should have one, because if a grid's going to go down, you might want to have power because we're so dependent upon electricity. And if the grid goes down, there's a good possibility it's not coming back. If we'd have a serious grid down situation, like a Carrington event, look that up, that happened some 40 years ago or whatever it was. Let alone the catastrophe I'm talking about, you know, a solar catastrophe of greater magnitude, a cyclical one. We have a very weakened magnetic field now. I tell you this all the time. This is true. And all this climate hogwash is nonsense. I'm looking at my book, and we're talking snow and cold weather in May. I'm in the mid-Atlantic states, man. When they used to say March comes in like a lion and out like a lamb, and April showers bring May flowers, it used to be the truth. But it hasn't been. So wherever they're making this stuff up and why people on the media are repeating these is just like as if they really are zombies, you know? You know, it's crazy. But let's get back to this idea. Now, if I lived along the banks of the Mississippi and I wanted to keep my house there, and I know the Mississippi floods every so often, I would make sure I built a retaining wall around my property. Or that the taxes of the people in those townships, boroughs, cities, or whatever along those banks, that there would be a project that would have these retaining walls that could withstand, that were at least several feet higher than the highest the banks, the water has ever, flood waters have ever risen. I would raise my bridges. You know? So I would make them more of arches. Right? Or I would consider bridges that opened up so that when this storm alert happened, that the bridge would open up so that if things that were caught by, you know, in that water wasn't going to take away the bridge. They don't do that. I wouldn't just call the Army Corps of Engineers down in New Orleans and have them shore up the same levees the same way. Right? I'd have them put in, you know, serious dikes. I'd have houses raised on pylons higher than the highest floodwaters there were. I would build my houses down in those areas where they get those strong hurricane winds. I would have them rounded and dome-like, like geodesic dome, that could withstand 400 miles per hour winds. And in Tornado Alley, I would build my buildings, restaurants, and schools. I wouldn't have a basement. I would have the first floor be a basement. Do you see? I mean, people live in skyscrapers where you can't open windows and stuff like that. But they don't do that. And then there's this loss of life and total loss of the building and everything else. And the upper ends of the set, I would do the same with the buildings there. I would have the buildings round cornered so that the wind, see, when you have winds coming at you straight on, when it hits a flat surface, that surface has a tendency to just plop right over. Or in some cases, the roofs fly off, or things get tangled up like insane, right? With the twister. That's why they call it that. But when they say get down to the lowest part of your building and the center of your building and stuff. So one would think that the code in that area would require, upon rebuilding, that you would have a floor, a complete floor underground with a concrete ceiling. And that would, not to be used as a, like some people say, well, we already have stuff like that. We have, fallout shelters and things like that. No. I'm talking about everyday use. And during tornado season, that those things would even be used more, would be the place where people, that would be the primary area. You don't want to lose everything. Put it, There are solutions to every problem. And the thing is, that's another thing about these ideas of engineers losing their jobs. People who basically can see this. Somebody 24 coming out is like, duh, I don't know. And I don't mean to be insulting, but that's basically it. I just want to get my student loan, forgiven. And like I say, then what? What's that going to do? You don't really have to pay back your student loan anyway. You don't really. I paid my student loan back. I mean, eventually they, in the 90s, I didn't have a big student loan because colleges didn't cost that much. The price at college became big business. It became part of the corporatocracy. They found a new, income stream. But in the last time I worked for a company, I mostly worked for myself on and off throughout the years. But from time to time, I worked for companies. I took a salary. Well, one of the last companies I worked for before my last job was my own company. I was publishing a magazine and doing advertising and ad agency. But just prior to that, I was working for a company, and they had attached from my wages. But the amount they can attach from your wages is so small that I didn't even care. And after a couple of years, it just paid off my student loan was paid off. So, the worst comes to worst, you get a good job and they start attaching this. They're only allowed to take like this, a real small percentage. They can't take more than your cost of living type of thing stuff away from you. Anyway. You see what I mean? It's like, so there's some formula. I don't know what it is. It's been so long ago and whatever. But, it's like anything else. It's like a lot of senior citizens don't know. When people are on Social Security, credit card companies can't take your Social Security money. They can't. It's law. There's a company called Helps, plural, that you should look into if you're of that age and you got Social Security old credit card debt that's like, they've raised the interest rate to like 29-30%, or it's in collection because you missed a payment and like suddenly you owed somebody a few $100s and now it's in the thousands and stuff and you can't pay it and they're harassing you and stuff. Check out this Helps organization. Look up seniors Social Security credit card Helps. I think it's helps.org. I'm not sure. Let me look for you in case there's someone here of that age. New window. I think it's helps.org. Helps plural. No. Helps. Let me look it up this way. I'm glad I did this because I don't want to. Helps Social Security. Helps debt. Helps senior debt. Let's see. See, it's pity this is like hidden because they have some of these like national debt relief. There's a lot of scammers out there. Yeah. I have it in the other room. Helps law firm. Let's see. Senior debt. Here, let's see. Helps is here. Okay. All right. Helpsishere.org. All right. And I'm going to put that in the chat right now. For Social Security recipients who can't pay their old debt. And they will help you. Anyway, Helps is here. I always get that wrong. And thank you, Marvelous G, for stopping by, whoever you were. Thank you. The point is, so it's not a matter of, there's a lot of people out there who are envious or have a problem. I have no problem with millennial generation. And I don't know why suddenly I'm freezing up again. That is really weird. This stream will end shortly. Because I'm telling, what did I do wrong, right? What did the algorithm find? I said some kind of key word. Anyway, hang with me. Apparently I'm freezing up, but from experience, I know my voice is usually still being transmitted, and this should clear up within the next so many, 10, 15, 30 seconds. It's still messing up. I'm broadcasting at 30 frames per second, but YouTube has got me, says it's not receiving enough video, but that's a lie. Anyway, hang in there. They do. This is starting to happen every other day now, and I don't know why. You know, they just don't want the truth out there. They really do not want the people to tell you truth and give advice. So I guess me telling you things, you know, there's some millennial out there that took offense to this or something. I don't know, or the algorithm is written in such a way that it does that. So anyway, as we continue with this and seem to be coming back to a broadcast feed level, yeah, I'm way in the green right now. The idea is that experience is what it's all about, and you should try to experience as much as you can experience in life. And that from an employer should want someone who has the most experience. And at the same time, having older employees around, you know, as mentors that you can apprentice under, in effect, or at least just have them there to ask questions to, seems to be the logical thing to do. But we seem to be doing the complete opposite. And when they say there's 11 million job openings out there, it just doesn't make sense. So I don't know what's going on, but it's trying to tell me there's no data right now. Yet on the stream status, it says stream is healthy and excellent. Really weird. Warning, this stream's bit rate is lower than the recommended bit rate, and it's 2684. That's nonsense. It says I have a good connection. I have an excellent connection. What, did they like raise their standards all of a sudden? You know? Really weird. It's telling me I have a good connection, not an excellent connection. That's not true. I have an excellent connection. Well, if the show ends early, I mean, we've had a good time. I think I've covered a lot of territory so far. If it's a bit choppy, I apologize for that. Okay? But all of these things I've been explaining, you see how there's these algorithms, and that's what this is, because remember, I'm an internet guy, right? From the beginning. So I know I'm looking at the stats. Your stream's current, they are basically trying to get me to stop broadcasting. I have a very strong bit rate, right? And so anyway, that they do not want these proactive things to be broadcast. They do not want people to know how to save lives in Tornado Alley. They do not want people to know how to save lives in the Gulf and in the hurricane areas, right? People want to know how to create HVAC systems that can improve air circulation and the cleanliness and disinfect the air. Right? Now it says I have an excellent connection, and actually the numbers of the kilobytes per second are lower than what they were claiming wasn't high enough. See, they're playing games. And they're hoping that anybody who was watching me will have, seen this frozen face and whatnot and just gave up on this don't want to see this through to the end. Man, am I tired of that. My last sip of coffee was hotter than my first, using that $9.99 coffee cup warmer I got. So yeah,
This is insane.
the stuff they do. But this is all we have for now. And one day the grid will go down and we won't even have this, which is another reason, like I say, you've got to get a power backup system. And you can get one as cheap as a couple $100, or you could, if you're the type of person that has credit, get one for $1,000 or so. And you could have, the power goes out, the grid goes down, you're fine. I mean, we're dependent upon electricity. It's the same thing as I tried telling you before. Today's a Sunday, so it's quiet. When you look at camera 2 up there, you just see white because it's snow on the ground, end of March. But you got to take care of yourself. You really ought to consider planting your own food, your own garden. And if you're living in an apartment, if you have a balcony, plant there. If you're inside and you don't have a balcony, like I've said before, be inventive. Take the if you have a south-facing window or a window that gets a lot of sun, put a shelf, a shelving unit either on the windowsill or a shelf, a wide shelf next to the window at the level of the window, just below the window where the sun shines down, and put some big planters there and grow yourself some herbs and some vegetables. They will grow inside. I've done it. I've eaten my own radishes. I'm growing tomatoes inside right now, believe it or not, under minimal conditions. I grow catnip for my cat. That grows wild. And that room gets cold. But I've grown, garlic and onions and, all sorts, and started all kinds of other things, which I've moved outside. You can grow lettuce and kale inside. I grew kale inside and ate it, put it in salads. They talk about food shortages and all this stuff. I mean, we have very high inflation. I said, I bought an awful lot of food yesterday, and my house is really filled up. I actually, like I said, I gained a pound because I bought a couple luxury items. I mean, they're healthy, but still the idea of even if they're just tasty. And so ate a little extra of some healthy foods. So it's not like it was bad for my body, but, a little too much in terms of caloric intake, I guess. So my weight, when I weighed myself this morning, I was like roughly a pound heavier than I was yesterday. But that's okay. I'm still within a good weight, good healthy weight right now. And I'm close enough that with activity. See, if I wasn't snowbound, I'm half tempted to go. I want to go for a walk today, but this is the whole thing. I try to tell you that these people, it's 28 frickin' degrees outside, and it's pretty much going to snow all day. The high is going to be 30, which is below 0 Celsius, below freezing Fahrenheit, and the overnight temperature is going to be 16 degrees. And this this is, a week in the spring. Why bother calling it spring? And that's another thing with age. See, somebody like Greta or some of these people, like I say, they don't understand. They never heard these stupid rhymes. March comes in like a lion and out like a lamb. April showers bring May flowers. So they don't understand that, the earth isn't warming. That's why they changed global warming to climate change, because because that was like, there were so many holes poked through that ridiculous lie. And then those UN IPC emails were exposed and all that stuff. And Al Gore was basically humiliated. I mean, he's hiding basically. right? And yet the media hasn't caught up. It's like these other things. The media doesn't talk. There's all these, everything is uncovered. The truth usually comes out. But what they do is they hold back the truth for like a couple of years, and then people forget, like, well, yeah, so what? What does that matter? Well, it matters because people have made societal changes. Companies have changed things. They're cutting off pipelines and stuff, and we need the heat. The upper portion of the United States, it's going to be 16 degrees tonight. And, they've cut off, 2 pipelines. Like, how are we going to, my house is heated by natural gas. What are you going to do? The windmills are all breaking and folded in half, and the fans are blowing off, and they've killed 1 million birds, and 1 million of them are rusting away in Canada, and they've got windmill graveyards in California. They ruin landscapes. Solar panels are covered with snow right now. They wouldn't work in high efficiency up here anyway, and most people live in houses or apartment buildings, so they don't have the real estate to put a big enough solar array, to heat and run their HVAC system. An HVAC system basically is heating and air conditioning. And the point of the matter is, so what are you going to do? So these people say, well, we were going to switch to electric. Yeah, but your electric car in many states is running on coal and natural gas. That's what makes the electricity to charge those batteries. I say this so often that I'm just tired of saying it, but I have to repeat it in hopes that a different person might tune in. Well, anyway, what you have to do is you've got to take care of you and yours, and you've got to think beyond, the propaganda. You got to turn off, like I say, ignore the media. The media and politicians are puppets, okay? Do you understand? Marionettes, all right? They're controlled by special interests, what I call the corporatocracy. Some people call it the technocracy, but it's not all tech. It's some of these like, agriculture, big ag, medicine. They use technology, but it's not like all big tech, right? Military contractors creating wars overseas while 2,000 people a week are being murdered here in the United States, and they're going unsolved, and our law enforcement agencies are just creating cold case files, right? Burying them, right? You turn on the TV, and it's all hypocrisy for profit. 40,000 people a week on average, based on CDC figures, divided by 12, the amount of people, the leading causes of death. 40,000 people a week are dying of things that are preventable, probably caused by processed foods, bad diets, lack of exercise, because we're all caged into these cubicles and taking jobs where we work on a computer, in a house, in an apartment. You understand? Whether it's intentional and nefarious or not, the direction that things are going are just making it worse. So the life expectancy of somebody right now in their 20s they'd be lucky if they could make it to 60. And you might say, wow, that would be a long life. Now, not when you're 58 or 59 and knowing that, and you've already had a couple of major operations and you're looking like it's over. Tell that to, like I say, I have an 88-and-a-half-year-old mother. I'm sure she's glad she's lived 28 more years than when in her 60s. And I'll tell you, both my father and mother had some good times in their 60s and 70s. In your early 60s, you still can do just about anything if you take care of yourself. But the point is, some of these people might not live to 40, or they'll be lucky if they make it to 40 without having a heart attack or some major problem. So, think about it. It's a ticking time, bomb. Your life expectancy. If you keep on this path and you keep listening to this media, the media just wants to sell, advertising. They just want you to they just entice you with their content, which is such a horrible word. This content, this war content, this crazy stuff like, false patriotism for, something that we know nothing about. Not really. We don't know what's going on over there. We don't really. All we know is this. And so they just want you to stay tuned during the commercials so they can make their multi-million-dollar salaries. And the companies that own them can make their billions of dollars. And the war-profiteers, right, can sell more ammunition and send, and billion-dollar jets and things like that. I don't care about the people over there. Big Pharma, if they really wanted to put their minds to it, I've said this before, I put out the challenge. Give me, $20 million and I'll put together a brain trust and we'll cure just about anything there is. I'll put together some of the key people and we'll cure whatever it is in 90 days, 120 days, 6 months at the outset. They don't want to cure things, right? I'll rewrite the recommendations, for, come on. Reconnection successful. So I guess I talked about that thing. Now I have an excellent connection. If you didn't hear it, I said we've got no business. And they wanted to cut me off because of that. Well, I hope you were able to at least see the cat. All right. And I don't know what YouTube is up to and why they're... The idea, the takeaway today is, experience is very important. And one of the reasons why, no data, this stream will end shortly. Okay, this is just not working. I'm going to put this to the ending screen, which if things are going to freeze, it might as well freeze on this, something that's still. Go to my site, ROCKFLUX.com, get my book, go to Great Solar Stuff, do one of these things, and, help this site out. I think we're going to have to move to Rumble to do these live broadcasts because YouTube doesn't seem to be, is playing some kind of, I don't know, a really nasty game. But, the big purge is on, and I didn't say anything wrong. I'm trying to be helpful, and, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Coming up on the 30th, today's the 27th, the 30th, I think through early April, there's going to be 20% off all my shirts, hoodies, and, all that, hats and all that kind of stuff. Go to Great Solar Stuff. It's not just solar stuff. There's some stuff there you can get to help you through these power grid down situations. And if you do buy my books, they're available on Amazon. Get the print version, $9.95. Then Watt's my latest. Codex is my other. There's 10 books available, actually. Anyway, I'm going to get off of here because this show seems to have been a somewhat disaster. I won't know. I'm going to watch it back and see how bad it was. Thank you for watching it and sticking with it, but it's just not worth going any longer. I did have some more things to say. We'll try again tomorrow, I guess. But go to rockflux.com. If I decide to switch to Rumble, right now my videos are a day late on Rumble. I'm posting them the next day. But if for some reason I don't appear on YouTube, I'll try to stream live from Rumble. Rumble seems a little bit slower on the draw, I noticed, just even with some of the bigger, even the people who are on there. But probably because so many people have come on. But they do offer live, and they do offer live through this system that I use. So I may be going over there. I don't know yet. I'll let you know. Thanks for watching again. Take care. Have a great day. Cheers.